On the frosty morning of December 29, 1890, a chilling silence enveloped the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. An uneasy calm hung in the air, one that seemed to whisper of impending tragedy. It was here, against the stark backdrop of the snow-covered plains, that a tragic chapter of American history would unfold, the Wounded Knee Massacre. Imagine, if you will, a community of Lakota Sioux, weary and desperate after years of displacement, broken treaties, and relentless encroachment on their lands. Many had lost their homes, their way of life, and poignantly, their loved ones to the brutalities of a government that promised protection, but delivered suffering. In the midst of this turmoil, a spiritual revival took shape, the Ghost Dance. This movement ignited hope among the Lakota, promising a return of the buffalo and the spirits of their ancestors. As we delve deeper into the historical context, we must explore the series of events that led to this momentous day. The US government, following a policy of assimilation, had systematically undermined Native American cultures through educational systems that sought to erase their languages and traditions. The Dawes Act of 1887 further dispossessed tribes of their land, distributing it to individual members while the surplus was sold to white settlers. These actions bred resentment and despair among the Lakota, whose ancestral lands were being stripped away. But this flicker of hope was met with fear. Tensions escalated as the soldiers, armed and anxious, approached the encampment at Wounded Knee Creek. In the eyes of the soldiers, the Lakota were not victims of injustice. They were a threat that had to be neutralized. As the sun began to rise, illuminating the camp, the Lakota gathered peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Among them was a weary leader, Bigfoot, who had sought refuge in the hopes of finding safety for his people. He had led his band across treacherous terrain, driven not by visions of warfare but by the dream of survival. But fate had other plans. When the soldiers arrived, a misunderstanding escalated into chaos. A deafening shot rang out. Who fired it remains a topic of debate to this day. Yet in that moment, a violent storm was unleashed. The soldiers opened fire, and in a matter of minutes the air was thick with gunfire, chaos, and the anguished cries of men, women, and children. What followed was a harrowing massacre. Estimates suggest that nearly 300 Lakota were killed, most of whom were non-combatants. The scene was horrific. The ground was painted red with the blood of innocents, while the deep winter cold wove through the air, chilling the very essence of humanity. As the dust settled, the soldiers who had been ordered to protect became the executioners. Yet even in the depths of despair, stories of courage emerged. One woman, a Lakota mother, shielded her child with her own body, refusing to let go of her only hope. Others attempted to flee, only to be pursued and shot down in the snow. The dead were left where they fell, a grim testament to the brutality of the day. As the tensions mounted on that fateful morning of December 29, 1890, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. The soldiers of the 7th Cavalry, under the command of Major Samuel M. Whitside, were apprehensive, fueled by the belief that the Lakota posed a threat to national security. The soldiers were ordered to disarm the Lakota camp, a task that was fraught with peril given the historical context of violence and mistrust between the two groups. In the dim light of dawn, the Lakota were gathered at Wounded Knee Creek, many of them unarmed and unaware of the impending violence. The leader of the Lakota, Bigfoot, had sought refuge and was trying to broker peace, believing that the presence of his people would temper the soldiers' actions. However, the soldiers approached with a different mindset, one of fear and aggression, convinced that the Ghost Dance movement could incite rebellion. As the soldiers began to disarm the Lakota, misunderstandings and fears escalated. The moment of chaos ignited when a Lakota man, perhaps startled by the soldiers or fearing for his life, resisted the disarmament. A shot rang out, though it remains unclear who fired the first bullet. This singular act of violence sparked an immediate and devastating response. In an instant, the soldiers unleashed a torrent of gunfire upon the gathered Lakota. What began as a chaotic skirmish rapidly devolved into a full-scale massacre. The soldiers, armed with rifles and artillery, fired indiscriminately into the crowd. The sound of gunfire echoed across the plains, mingling with the screams of men, women, and children as they struggled to escape the onslaught. The brutality of the massacre was exacerbated by the soldiers' tactics. They set up a barricade and used artillery against the fleeing Lakota, firing Hotchkiss guns, rapid-fire cannons that could decimate large groups of people. The snow around Wounded Knee Creek turned crimson, a stark contrast to the white landscape, symbolizing the bloodshed that marked this tragic day. Witness accounts describe the chaos and horror unfolding before their eyes. Many Lakota tried to flee into the surrounding hills, but soldiers pursued them relentlessly. Some sought refuge in the nearby ravines, only to be hunted down like prey. The massacre was not limited to combatants. Entire families were caught in the crossfire. Children were not spared, and mothers were often found shielding their little ones in a futile attempt to protect them from the violence. Among those who fought back were brave Lakota warriors who, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, attempted to defend their people. Some armed themselves with rifles, while others resorted to traditional weapons. But the odds were overwhelmingly against them. The soldiers' superior firepower and tactical advantage made resistance nearly impossible. The battle was over almost as quickly as it began, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. By the end of the massacre, estimates suggest that nearly 300 Lakota were killed, with many more wounded. The soldiers suffered fewer than 30 casualties, a stark juxtaposition that highlighted the one-sided nature of the confrontation. The aftermath was chilling. The ground was littered with the bodies of the slain, and the survivors were left to grapple with the enormity of their loss. In the days following the massacre, the US government attempted to downplay the events at Wounded Knee, framing it as a necessary military action. Reports filtered in, skewed by the prevailing attitudes of the time, which often portrayed Native Americans as the aggressors. This narrative sought to absolve the soldiers of their actions and cast the Lakota as a threat, rather than victims of a brutal and unprovoked attack. Weeks later, the world would learn of Wounded Knee. It would be reported not just as a massacre, but as the last battle of the Indian Wars, a poignant symbol of the US government's relentless campaign to subjugate Native Americans. But what is often overlooked is the profound impact this event had on the fabric of American society. The massacre ignited outrage among many, including journalists and reformers, who began to question the morality of US policies toward Native Americans. The public's response was mixed. While some condemned the violence, others dismissed it as necessary. This duality remains a hallmark of American discourse on race and justice even today. As decades passed, the memory of Wounded Knee transformed into a symbol of resilience and resistance. Survivors and their descendants carried the burden of this history, turning pain into a rallying cry for rights and recognition. The massacre became a focal point for Native American activism, encapsulating the struggle for sovereignty, dignity, and the right to exist. In the aftermath, the site of Wounded Knee became a hallowed ground. The Lakota people returned to honor their dead, establishing their own memorials and ceremonies to ensure that the memories of those lost would never fade. They became stewards of their history, determined that the lessons learned would echo through generations. In 1973, the site once again became the center of conflict when activists occupied Wounded Knee to protest the federal government's treatment of Native Americans. This 71-day standoff drew national attention, forcing America to confront the historical injustices that had long been ignored. The occupation served as a potent reminder that the struggles of the past were still relevant in the contemporary fight for justice. As the years passed, the memory of the Wounded Knee Massacre was further enshrined in American history. In 1989, the National Park Service designated the site as a National Historic Landmark, recognizing its significance as a place of mourning, memory, and resilience. This designation was a step toward acknowledging the deep scars left by the massacre and the ongoing legacy of displacement and trauma faced by Native peoples. The aftermath of the massacre had profound effects on the Lakota people. The loss of life was staggering, but the emotional and psychological scars ran even deeper. Families were shattered, and the fabric of Lakota society was irrevocably altered. Today, as we reflect on the events of that tragic day, it becomes clear that the Wounded Knee Massacre was not merely a historical incident, but a pivotal moment in the broader narrative of Native American resistance and resilience. It serves as a testament to the enduring spirit of the Lakota people and their commitment to honoring the memory of the lives lost during that fateful encounter, reminding us of the strength and resilience that continues to define their culture today. Thank you for exploring this pivotal chapter in history with us. Until next time, remember, the past is not just a story, it's the foundation of our present.